Hello, this is Starla Henderson, and we are once again working on our scarecrow. This is part 2 of this week's video tutorial, and we've already done the first part, which was learning how to do the leg. Now we're going to do the brim of the hat. And the brim of the hat is going to have a little bit of an inside point, or a little bit of a dip here, and as well as an inside curve, and it's got 2 outside points. It's the very last thing you are going to applique onto your scarecrow. So, what we're going to do is, because for time purposes, I'm going to start just before, I'm not going to do the whole inside curve, I'm going to start just before we get to that point so I can show you the point. Then we're going to go around that point, and I'll show you the inside curve and the outside, or the inside point and the outside point. Here we go. Now, let me remove my basting stitches. So you have this basted down, and whenever I'm doing this, I'm starting towards the end, so I'm going to remove these basting stitches just till I get past that point. I want to leave the rest of them in. And I'm going to clip this where I'm going to start, right up to that line. That curve's going to have to be clipped anyway, so as you're coming up to it, that's the way it's going to work. Alright, here we go. You're going to turn this, and you're going to, just as we did on the other points, you're going to work right up to that point. This one's kind of got a curve to it. If you'll see, when I push that under, it doesn't want to lay flat, so I'm going to go ahead and clip that again. And that way, just like earlier, whenever I get through, it will lay and look like that curve that you are trying to achieve. Okay, I'm going to bury my knot up underneath in the seam allowance, right in that curve, and take a tiny stitch, and I'm going to work needle turning all the way to that curve, to that point. There we go. And I've got it laid down. Now I'm going to sew, doing my little needle turn stitch, and going into the fold. Now, I'm going to take a tiny, tiny stitch and go right into where that point is. Right into it. And pull it tight. Now, I'm going to have to turn my work, because you're going to take your needle, and I'll pull out my basting stitches a little bit further, and you're going to take your needle and you're going to go, now my point's pretty well trimmed, I'm not going to trim it anymore. I'm going to put right into the end of that point, and with a swooping motion of that needle, I tuck it all under, and I push it in, just like that. Okay? Do it one more time. Now I try not, it's best, of course for videoing purposes I'm doing it over, to try and do this on the first time. The more you play with it, the more you're going to fray this and make it harder to turn. I would suggest you practice on something else until you get this little swooping motion down. But you're going to take your needle, put it in that point, and just tuck it under, and it just swoops under. And then I'm going to go ahead and tuck the rest, and now I'm going to pull just a little bit and make sure that my point is pulled out there. And I'm going to take a very tiny stitch, because I want to secure what I've just tucked in. I don't want it peeking or pulling back out on me. Okay, and now I'm just going to keep going along this outside curve, tucking as I go. And if it doesn't want to tuck as much as you're trying to, if it's really fighting you, because you're working in a little space, trim some of it back. Not a lot. You don't want to go any less than 1/8 of an inch. And I wouldn't suggest you go even that far if you're brand new at this. Alright, you're just going to keep going right around this curve. And the point, this isn't a sharp point. It's not designed to be a sharp point. You've got a fairly good point here, but then it curves out. And that's the way it's supposed to do. Here we go, all the way around. Now, I'm starting to get close to this inside little dip. And it's not a real sharp point either, and in fact it's mostly going to probably look like a little indentation in your brim of your hat, because it's not a sharp inside point. But as you get there, you're going to get to a point where you can't turn this because you've got that point, and it's just not going to work. So that's when I pull out a few more basting stitches, and then I'm going to take and I'm going to clip straight into that little dip, right up to my marked line, or right up to the line that you're going to turn if you haven't marked it, if you're looking at your needle holes. And then I just keep right on going, and I turn that, and I tuck that little point in, just like that. Alright, now I'm going to sew that down. Here we go. Sew that down. And I'm going to go with my next stitch, I'm going to go right in to that point, just on the other side of my drawn line. Just on the other side of that drawn line. Okay. Then I'm going to take, the next step is to take my needle, I'm going to hold it right here, and I'm going to take it and I'm going to tuck that under, and I kind of swoop it through that point that I just did. Kind of just swish it under there, and that way if there's any stray threads, because you've clipped that fairly close, it will catch it. And then I'm going to go straight down into that little V, that inside point. And you can see my stitches with the white thread, possibly. But whenever I do this, normally I do not use a contrasting thread. And then I come back up into that fold, a stitch length away, and just keep right on going around that curve. And you're just going to, like anything else, when you're doing an outside curve, you just turn it a little bit at a time, following that line. There are no real tricks to an outside curve, and you just keep right on appliquing the rest of the way around. Now, the head of the scarecrow is sort of a circle, and I made it lumpy on purpose because that way it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's an outside curve. It's really simple to do. So to finish the scarecrow, you are going to do this in the order that I stated the last time. Basting it down, appliquing it down, basting it down, just build it all the way up. On the hat, after you get the head done, you're going to do the crown of the hat first, the top part, and then you're going to do the brim. And that's how we complete the scarecrow. Once you've done the scarecrow, you're going to need to go on down for next week's lesson, because I'm going to show you how I did all of the pumpkins. You're going to applique down your hay bales, the rest of them, and those are real simple. You're going to go around all of them though, and it's just straight lines and simple outside curves. So you're going to applique down your hay bales, and then next week I will show you how to do our pumpkins. Thank you for joining me. This is Fronterhouse Quilts blog, and we're working on the scarecrow of our fall sampler.